Other stories making news this hour, they're calling it a first for California.
Tejon Ranch Company says as far as the California condor is concerned, a new habitat conservation plan for the ranch is the most comprehensive in state history. And it needs to be just that, perhaps even more to satisfy certain environmental groups. Tomorrow, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will release its initial review of Tejon's habitat conservation plan for thousands of acres considered critical habitat for the condor and several other species. The intent of the plan is to balance wildlife protection with a private landowner's right to develop property. But despite the exhaustive process getting to this point, at least one organization is promising a lawsuit.
It is perhaps the most coveted swath of wilderness left in central California. In southern Kern County, four distinct ecosystems converge. The coastal mountains, the oak-studded Tehachapis, the pine-laden eastern Sierra, and the desert grasslands, home to 5 federally protected species of plants and animals, most notably the California condor. This is the boundary of Tejon Ranch. The area colored in green represents the critical habitat covered under the ranch's conservation plan. More than 140,000 acres of pristine wilderness.
Tejon Ranch says this is an historic habitat conservation plan, the largest of its kind in California that offers protection for the condor. Total acreage covered under this plan, twice the size of the city of Bakersfield. It offers protection for 27 different species of plants and animals, most of which aren't even listed as endangered by the federal government.
Tejon Ranch CEO Bob Stein says the conservation plan took into account species that might be listed in the future but aren't now.
We don't want to do it again. No, the HCP process is a complicated one and an expensive one, so it started off originally in our process with Fish and Wildlife Service as a condor HCP, and we ended up saying, well, let's cover any species that would be possible, so that this was, we believe, is the most comprehensive HCP plan put in place in the country so far.
Especially where the endangered condor is concerned. Protections include feeding stations for the condor, some designed to draw the condor away from the coastal range back to its original home, the eastern Sierra Nevada. High power lines would be buried, development along ridge lines restricted, more GPS tracking units for the birds.
First and foremost, we're protecting 94% of all the critical habitat on Tejon Ranch for the California condor.
But it's the last 6% that could be problematic. Roughly 26,000 acres near the southern border of Kern County, where Tejon Ranch plans to build homes, resort hotels, and golf courses. Tejon Mountain Village.
I mean, you couldn't pick a worse place in the entire state of California for a development project, not just for the impact of the California condor, but for linkages between all these different mountain ranges. And it's a big problem. It's a bad place for development.
In fact, the Center for Biological Diversity says regardless of what the Fish and Wildlife Service says about Tejon's habitat conservation plan on Friday, it will probably end up in court.
It's a recipe for disaster. We're going to be challenging this thing and fighting this thing every step of the way.
It could go to court, but we think we put together an extraordinarily defensible plan.
Tejon's Bob Stein says the overall intent is twofold: protect the environment and ensure the ranch's right to develop its property. He thinks the Fish and Wildlife Service will agree.
Our business activities can very easily coexist with endangered species, so long as we follow the procedures that are outlined in the plan.
Tejon Ranch says it has spent nearly $7 million in 10 years on this habitat conservation plan. Federal approval of that plan is a crucial step as Tejon attempts to proceed with its Tejon Mountain Village and Centennial development projects. And we will see tomorrow what the Fish and Wildlife Service thinks of that plan. We'll have more tomorrow night on 17 News at 5.